I hereby call to order this meeting of the King George County Service Authority Board of Directors. We will begin with the invocation. I'm sorry, do I need to acknowledge that Ms. Cleveland is participating remotely? Should we go ahead and do that first? We can do it after. Okay, we just haven't had to do it in such a long time. All right, very good. So immediately following the invocation and the pledge, then we will go ahead and acknowledge members participating in person and online. Thank you. We'll lead with the invocation by Mr. Morris and the Pledge of Allegiance by Mr. Weekly. Please stand as you are able.
Lord, we ask for your guidance this evening as we discuss the business of the Service Authority. Help us to make decisions that benefit our fellow man and our environment. Amen.
Mr. Weekly, do you have a copy of the disclosure?
I will send you electronic. Give me 1 second.
Sure. And I'll just read it on email because I'm having some technical difficulties with thank you, Mr. Britton. Thank you. Electronic participation is encouraged, and pursuant to the governor's emergency orders, social distancing shall be maintained for all physically present. If you choose to be physically present, you will be screened by authorized staff for signs and symptoms of illness. Based on the results of that screening, certain physical attendees may be denied entry. The following members are physically present.
Alan Parker, physically present.
James Morris, physically present.
Kathy Binder, physically present.
Annie Kupka, physically present. The following members are participating through electronic and remote means pursuant to the rules previously adopted by this board and through the governor's budget. Ms. Cleveland, could you acknowledge, please, ma'am? Ms. Cleveland, can you hear me?
I can hear you now. Carrie Cleveland, participating remotely.
Very good. Thank you, ma'am. I direct the clerk to include this statement and any statement of remotely participating board members to be memorialized in the minutes. All right. Are there any amendments to the agenda, Mr. Weekly?
No amendments, Madam Chair.
Very good. We'll move on to public comment. Comments will be limited to 3 minutes per person in order to afford everyone an opportunity to speak. Thank you. If comments relate to a specific public hearing item, we ask that you offer those comments at the time of the public hearing. Is there anyone here in the audience who wishes to come forward to offer public comment? Seeing none, Mr. Dines, do we have anyone online who wishes to provide public comment? And members, did anyone read any correspondence offered for public comment? All right, we'll move on to reports of members of the board. Go ahead, Mr. Parker.
No report, ma'am.
Mr. Morris?
No report, ma'am.
Ms. Binder?
No report.
Ms. Cleveland?
No report.
Thank you, ma'am. And I just want to take a moment to thank Mr. Weekly for reaching out to a constituent who had some very technical and detailed questions for me about our water supply, and he was able to answer her questions, my understanding, and also directed her as well to Marta Perry from Tri-County City Soil and Water Conservation District. So thank you very much for that, sir. All right, consent agenda.
I make a motion we accept the consent agenda.
I'll second.
All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Chair votes aye. Motion carries. Report from the county attorney, Mr. Britton.
No report, Madam Chair.
Very good. Thank you, sir. Seeing no presentations and reports, nor action, nor discussion items, we will move on to the general manager's report. Mr. Weekly.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Normally every quarter, the board had asked to go from monthly to quarterly reports of compliance when it comes to wastewater treatment plants. Being I'm acting in this role at this time for the wastewater department, I had the time to submit data last month, so I'm a little bit familiar with it than normal. So we'll start with Dahlgren Wastewater Treatment Plant. These are the nutrient numbers. However, if there's any performance issues for non-nutrients such as E. coli and TSS, I will list that out. So year to date on total nitrogen, we are below our annual limit. What I try to strive for is usually half for our target. That way we have plenty of buffer. So there's a little buffer there. This is based on 12 months. So this will average out as each month goes on. So we're still below the annual limit for total nitrogen. On total phosphorus, we're just outside of the 0.3 milligrams per liter. We're at a 0.31. We believe that we'll start averaging below that. However, what I have to report is that we have exceeded E. coli and TSS limits in March. We did receive a notice of violation for noncompliance. The April data that was just submitted by May 10th, we reported no violations. And so far, all the data that we've received through the middle of May, we are on track for full compliance. Fairview Beach, total nitrogen, we have an annual limit of 6.5 milligrams per liter. Year to date, we're at 2.57. Total phosphorus, we have an annual limit of 1 milligram per liter. We're year to date of 0.14, so well below even half of those limits. Hopyard Farms, we're just above the annual limit for total nitrogen. We are trending down. January and February seem higher. Naturally, you have colder months, but you hope to make that up the rest of the year. So we believe we'll come out ahead on the year, but I am reporting year to date, we're over by about 0.41. When I say over, we're over year to date. We're not over for the annual limit. So there's no exceedance at this time. We just have to be under that number at the end of December. Total phosphorus, doing very well there. Perkins Corner, we're doing fairly well from a nutrient standpoint. We've had multiple month events with what is known as total colloidal nitrogen. It's a component of nitrogen. We had exceedance for March and April, then an E. coli limit for April. Some of that we found that we had higher limits in portions of the treatment tank. And we believe we got that under wraps. We've added some additional pumps for some recirculation. We believe the existing mixers that were in those tanks are undersized. So yes, we did receive a warning letter for noncompliance. May so far, again, through the middle of the month, performance is on track to meet permit limits. I see no surprises. I've been out to that facility a couple times this month already. Oakland Park, we're doing very well. Oakland Park and Perkins have very high annual limits. So you can see we're well below. And actually, those areas, when you hear me ever talk about cutting back chemicals or if we want to boost that up some, we have a wiggle room there, which we can maybe realize some savings in chemicals. But we're doing very well. And the blowers I reported on, I want to say it was back in February, so we put in, it's performing very well. So we appreciate that improvement that the board approved and the energy efficiencies we're receiving from it. Just some other information. I just want to keep you up year to date. So as everyone knows, our budget is built around 50 full service connections for the year. That's 50 water and sewer residential connections. So this is the breakdown of where we're at year to date. So we've had 73 water and sewer residential connections, 10 water only residential. So that's like Presidential Lakes, for example, would qualify for that. And 2 water only commercial. So again, if we know during budget time and we do try to reach out to some builders. Obviously there are some national builders, but some local builders for commercial or residential. But if it's known, we'll try to capture that. But there was no known commercial that was in at that time. But we're doing very well in the year. I think the budget report, when it comes out, will show that. I believe everyone received the recent cash flow report. So when you receive those, please reach out to me if you have any questions, or as well as Ms. Hahn's office. Be happy to have that conversation. But from a connection standpoint, we're doing fairly well. What is not up here, we have about $54,000 of CARES funding remaining. We do have a group that'll go in. I think it's around $8,600 will be applied this billing cycle. So that number is steadily coming down. They did revise where that money has to be used this year. So we're working our as fast as we can to get rid of, not to get rid of, to expend those funds and help folks. So please, pass the word along. But we identify that through our muni billing software. It's not a mass mailing that would go out to everybody because you have to qualify for it. It's a financial hardship. There are intake forms online for residents or commercial customers. If they, qualify for that, they can print out those forms, email them back, bring them by our office, and we'll be happy to assist them. Madam Chair, that's all the information I have for you tonight in my GM report. Any questions?
Thank you, sir. Ms. Cleveland, can we start with you, ma'am, since you're online? Do you have any questions for Mr. Weekly?
No questions, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am. Mr. Parker?
Yeah, I guess my only questions are, it seems like we've had several exceedances lately, and I'm kind of a little surprised about Hop Yard even having trouble keeping up, because that's a newer plant. I guess with some of the stuff, especially like Perkins Corner and whatnot, with some of these issues, do we think we have them back under wraps for the rest of the year? What was causing them, or more specifically?
Sure. So with Dahlgren, we installed some additional aeration. We had issues with the rotors out there, so we budgeted for that replacement this coming year. We actually this past week went out and I will say put a short-term fix to get one of the rotors back going, which we saw in December. We haven't had that type of exceedance again, but there are some exceedance. So UVs are the primary when it comes to E. coli. We have 3 systems that are basically obsolete, and they're all the same. So Dahlgren, Fairview Beach, and Perkins Corner have obsolete. So you need to keep the system running that's there. When I say obsolete, you can buy bulbs for them still. Finding ballasts that are for those particular systems. We are finding that some of the ballasts that were in particularly Perkins Corner were not the correct ones. We did have the correct ones for Dahlgren, but we had to do a lot of rewiring and relamping. Apparently it looked like water had gotten into, and I welcome you all to come out any time, but basically there's a rack that these lights set in, and they're supposed to push and have gasket connections, and your wires go through that. It's like a conduit. So anytime something fails, you get water in there, it's not good. So I believe Dahlgren, we're back on track. And there was some blinding of the filter. We got all that polymer cleaned up. That is not a method that I allow. Polymer is very tricky. You should use it for solid handling only. Very limited if you're trying to do it for settling in your process, because it can go downstream and blind your filters. So I would say earlier on, March Bay experienced that, but I believe we're back on track. Nothing for Fairview Beach. Hop Yard, so we haven't exceeded anything. So what we're finding there is we had some transducers, so there's some levels involved and how you fill your tank and your sequencing that you do there. So we've made some adjustments. We believe there are good adjustments. So we're all a little higher. We haven't exceeded anything, but we believe those adjustments with the transducers and the levels will help. One of the things we're working with, and it's a free service, you know, I like free, especially if it's quality. Aqua Aerobics designed, it's their treatment design for Hop Yard and Fairview Beach. So we can send data, we can get on a call, we can ask those questions like, hey, this is what we're seeing. We're not quite figuring this out. Do you have any advice? What's very odd for Hop Yard Farms is that there's 4 wastewater pump stations that feed the wastewater treatment plant, and all 4 of those have very high TKN. You know, 15 to 30 milligrams per liter may be expected, but there are some over there that average between 50 to 70 milligrams per liter. So when we had a process review with Mr. Wyack from Aqua Aerobics, he said, you're meeting numbers, but your loading is almost like you're at capacity, which is the 0.375 permit we're at now from a TKN loading standpoint. So we're going to look at things, whether we run 1 SBR right now, there are 2. So initially it was a loading concern of flow plus nutrient to make sure you had enough to keep 2 tanks active and living. So we may have to look at going to 2. We have been working with our SCADA contractor to see, there were some things that were running in hand. We believe we can run those in auto now, but there's single basin mode and dual basin mode. So again, with the transducer tweaks, we believe performance has improved, but the loading factor is what we want to watch to make sure that that number continues to go down. So,
Do you know what is spiking the TKN?
we do not. It's odd for a residence, and it's all. There's no commercial property over there. It doesn't seem like things are sitting in a wet well long. With the improvements the board approved for the remote monitoring stations for pump stations, we can look at run times. So we don't see anything where, like industrial park, for example, for the open park system, that pumps very intermittently. So you would expect that. For the 4 pump stations there, again, it's domestic waste, and they cycle pretty often. We're not seeing any, you know, dark, like my laptop color influent coming in, something leading to that. So we could put a composite sampler in there to see if it's you know, a certain time of the day, but it's very odd from a domestic waste standpoint, and that the pump stations are cycling more frequently. So we'll just have to keep an eye on it. It's good that we know that loading exists. It may affect future design. Right now we're able to handle it, but it's good we were able to identify that. But we do take advantage of that service as well. Perkins Corner, I don't want to make excuses for it. Some of that is just, it's an older facility. We just repiped some of the airline today out there, and it's just, you have to stay on top of it. The E. coli, again, we rebulbed everything out there recently. Those numbers have dropped significantly. There were mixers that failed earlier, I want to say back in March. We got those back online. We were taking TKN samples and a variety of other testing samples from the anoxic zone, which is at the beginning of the plant. And we were seeing like 200 milligrams per liter of TKN. So that loading is very high as well. We hauled a bunch of that solids away to be processed at Dahlgren, and we didn't add more mixers. We added some pumps, but they act like recirculation. So it's essentially doing the same. We just want to make sure that tank has turnover. After we got those high numbers and we went out and observed the mixing pattern, it didn't seem as consistent. So we believe that mixing has improved. In May, you know, we have 2 weeks of data so far where, you know, the numbers are not even nowhere close to exceeding the permit limits. In Oakland, we're doing fine. So the 2 problematic plants have been Dahlgren and Perkins. Dahlgren, again, no compliance issues in April, and the 2 weeks of data we have for May show that we're on track. Perkins, while we had violation in April, we seem to be on track with the 2 weeks of data we have there. The Perkins, when we get to capital budget talks and planning, I think it's a conversation, you know, we'll have to have.
No further questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Parker. Mr. Morris?
No questions, but thank you for the explanations to Mr. Parker's questions.
Ms. Bender?
I was going to say the same thing. You answered my question in your detailed answer to Mr. Parker's. Thank you.
And I will say the same likewise. Thank you very much for that. All right. I believe we are ready to adjourn if there is a motion.
I make a motion, we adjourn to June 1st, 2021 at 5:30 PM here in the boardroom.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
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 Chair votes aye, motion carries. This meeting is hereby adjourned to the next regularly scheduled meeting on June 15th, June 1st. I'm thinking too far ahead. June 1st, 2021 at 5:30 PM in the boardroom. That meeting may be held by electronic means and/or remote participation only and may be closed to the public being physically present. All citizens are encouraged to participate in advance or during the meeting by electronic means as provided by the county. We are adjourned.